Hi, everybody. This is Karma, back again with episode 35 of My Life Stories. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Before we get started, hit that like button before you forget, and subscribe to not miss any new episodes. Hit the bell icon to receive notifications of any new stories. As a subscriber, this makes it easy for you to get any new content. And if you have a chance, listen to my playlist when you have a little bit of time. I've decided to name this story my entitled An Eccentric Friend. A few years ago, my husband and I were in a downturn in our lives. I was not working, but actively searching for employment. My husband had a friend who he had known for some years that I had never met, so he and I became friends by proxy. It turned out that my husband's friend was in the process of becoming an independent adjuster. He encouraged me to do the same thing, as, according to him, this particular field was very lucrative. And we used the last of our funds to get me educated enough to be able to work in this field. I'll call this friend Ronald, not his real name. My husband had never really talked about Ronald. The only thing he said before I left on deployment for the first time was that Ronald could be a little difficult at times. Ronald can be a great guy. He can be warm and friendly and always keeps massive amounts of candy at his desk that he shares with everyone. He was and is a very intelligent person, but can come off as a bit of a blowhard at times. One thing I immediately found out was that Ronald absolutely cannot go out to eat at a restaurant. I repeat, cannot go eat at a restaurant. And let me explain why. First of all, Ronald seems to believe that no one can cook as well as he does. And secondly, every single time we have gone to get a meal at a restaurant, we have had issues. It always starts off innocuously as soon as he receives his meal. A disappointed, "Oh," and a slump of his shoulders, followed by his catchphrase of, "I have no luck at restaurants," before he points out what is wrong with his meal. Underdone, overdone, not enough, or too much. Ronald has always maintained that he does not eat rice, unless it tastes really good. And according to him, there is only one place in our state that serves good rice. This little idiosyncrasy on its own has created major issues at some of the meals we've shared. For some reason, Ronald has decided that if anything about his meal, and I mean anything, is not to his satisfaction, he can just walk away from it and not look back. We had gone to a restaurant known for its seafood. Let's call this place Ted Foster's. The majority of their entrees have either rice, baked potatoes, or French fries as a side. Ronald was feeling expansive, and he was in a good mood that night. He chose Ted Foster's for us to go eat at, and decided to have a few drinks with his meal. He ordered the rock lobster and an appetizer that he wanted. This entree and appetizer were the most expensive on the menu. His entree came with rice, and he specified that he wanted double vegetables instead. It was Friday night, and Ted Foster's was extremely busy. This is the only reason that I can come up with for the mistake that was made for Ronald's order. As the waitress brought the food to our table, and she started to place the dishes before us, Ronald caught sight of the rice on his plate and lost his mind. The poor waitress never knew what hit her. The ferocity of the verbal attack that Ronald inflicted on her was beyond compare. It didn't matter that she offered to return his food and get his order corrected immediately. His screaming got the manager involved as I put my head on the table and covered my ears. In the end, Ronald just walked away despite the threats from the manager that she would call the police for theft of services, as his bill was almost $100. I asked that she please make the food to go, and paid for my small meal that I had not even had the chance to eat, and the untouched entree and appetizer that Ronald had ordered. And no, he never ate the meal and never paid me back for it. Another instance included a time I paid for our meal in cash by leaving the entire amount plus tip with the ticket on the table. I was aggravated with him and wanted to get out of the restaurant as soon as I could because he had been rude to the waitress. Again. My mistake was leaving him at the table by himself. I had driven us to the restaurant. Ronald never drove anywhere and would frequently brag about how little gas he used and how a tank of gas would last him a month. When he got into my car, he had an evil grin on his face. I was so angry, I didn't say anything to him. He looked at me and announced that the waitress had not deserved a tip, so he had taken it. I was horrified and decided to just come back the next day to give the waitress her tip. No way did I trust Ronald to send him back in with a tip. And before you ask, no, he never gave me back the $5 tip either. We got the opportunity to work with a great bunch of people. A group of us gamblers decided to go to the nearby casino on a Tuesday evening when they had a special of steak and lobster for $14.99. Ronald made it very clear that he did not believe in gambling and saw it as a waste of time and money. Since he was entitled to his feelings and we were entitled to ours, we made the decision not to invite him. To my complete chagrin, Ronald invited himself along, informing us that he would eat dinner with us and then go home. We all got to the casino and advised the waitress that we were waiting for everyone before we would order. All except Ronald, who decided to put his order in and eat so he could just go home. After about 30 minutes, everyone was there, so we went ahead and ordered the special. Ronald expected his food right away and sat there steaming when the waitress bought everybody's food at the same time. I, being the only one in the group with experience, let Ronald pick his seat first and then sat at the opposite end of him as far away as possible. A sweetheart of a coworker of ours, I'll call her Jenny, had the great misfortune to sit next to him. I could see Ronald stewing and could hear his voice getting louder and louder as he complained that he did not get his meal first. He had a little bit of a crush on this particular coworker, so compared to the way he normally was, he was acting like a prince. When his food came, I wound up choking when I saw Ronald begin to cut his steak into pieces, chew it, and then spit it out on his plate. I still have nightmares about the look on poor Jenny's face at this. Before anyone at the table could say anything, Ronald took off and demanded to speak to a manager. He yelled at this poor manager for at least 15 minutes about the poor quality of his steak and the gristle and God knows what else, and then turned around and walked right out without paying. I rubbed my temples. The poor manager came to the table and advised us that he was comping everyone's meal. We told him that we didn't have any problems paying for our meals, but he insisted. I just shook my head. The only time I've ever seen Ronald check himself was when my husband came to the state where I was working to visit for the weekend. Ronald had insisted he would take us to dinner, and I had advised my husband, who had never gone out to eat with him, to be prepared for a scene. We went to eat at a steakhouse that Ronald had chosen. Unfortunately, as soon as the entrees came, Ronald had a problem with the way his steak was cooked and decided to let the waitress know about it. My husband cocked his eyebrow at him and calmly said, "Shut up, Ronald, and eat your steak." which Ronald did, albeit begrudgingly. I looked at my husband with wide-eyed adoration, thanking him silently for this one dinner with no drama he had gifted me. Apparently, my husband is one of the only people in the world that Ronald will kowtow to. When we were deployed to Florida, we met our friend I will call David. David was a supervisor for the company we were working with. He met and liked Ronald. Ronald has a charm about him that lots of people are attracted to. The three of us went to lunch, and when David turned to call the waitress for more tea, I looked at Ronald pointedly and shook my head when I saw him raise his hand to complain about something. David never noticed this exchange between the two of us, and lunch was uneventful. David had an open-door policy at work and was always open to questions, and I was able to pick up quite a bit of knowledge from him. He asked if I was up for lunch and mentioned that he would ask Ronald to join us. I tentatively explained that Ronald always had issues going out to eat and warned him that he should be prepared for anything. David gave me a strange look but did not comment any further. Due to work restrictions, we had to cancel lunch. David and Ronald decided to go to dinner together that evening. I was not invited to join them and figured it may have been because of the warning I had given David. Oh well. The next day in the morning, David sought me out. He's a fair man, and as he started to tell me what happened the night before, he blushed ferociously. They had gone to a sandwich shop for dinner. They both placed their order at the counter and decided to eat there. Their order was brought to them, and right away, Ronald noticed that his sandwich was not toasted, a cardinal sin in his eyes. The counter worker explained that at their location, they do not toast their sandwiches. Ronald's solution was to tear the sandwich apart while throwing all the ingredients on the table and on the floor while ranting and raving. Then he got up and walked out. Thankfully, he had paid for the sandwich already, so David was not stuck with the bill. He had been horrified by Ronald's exhibition and explained to the staff that he had had a death in the family and was not himself and apologized for his behavior. He also apologized to me the next day for not believing my warning. After that, David never went to go eat with Ronald by himself again unless I came along. I'm sure that after all this, you're wondering, why would I even maintain my friendship with Ronald all these years? The answer is that despite the issues that Ronald has with going out to eat at restaurants, he is at heart a good person, and there can never be too many good people in your life. A few weeks ago, a friend of Ronald's called him to tell him that the persistent sore throat he had for some time turned out to be stage 4 cancer. Ronald got into his vehicle right after this phone call and drove to the Panhandle hours away to see his friend. So, since he arrived, Ronald has been driving his friend over to the doctor's office and to all his chemo and radiation therapies 3 times a week. Remember, Ronald hates to drive anywhere. I talked to him the other day, and he was explaining that his friend may have to go into the hospital. I explained that since his friend is in stage 4 of his cancer, that if he goes into the hospital, he may never come out. That is what my mother went through with her cancer. I commiserated with him about his friend, and then we discussed going back to work. He's really worried about his friend. So that's Ronald, a big eccentric enigma wrapped in entitlement. He has his faults, but don't we all? I'll bet he has some juicy stories about me, too. I don't go out to eat with him very much anymore. The last time was last year. He asked me to split an appetizer with him, and for once, he was happy with his order. It was raining really hard outside, and I teased Ronald about his dating life. It was a very good meal, and we both left happy. I really treasure that memory. So, what's the lesson here? Well, the lesson is that sometimes you have to accept people just as they are, faults and everything. Ronald is one of the only people in my life that still calls me to check in and see how I'm doing, and I really appreciate that. Our conversations are short, but they do take place. He always lets me know if there are any jobs open in our field, and I do the same for him. He's quite charismatic, and despite his faults, he does have his redeeming qualities. I believe that sometimes people come into your life for a reason. He came into mine to teach me patience and acceptance, and I'm hoping that he learned to be a little bit more tolerant of others from me. Let me know if you have an eccentric or entitled friend in the comments section, or leave me 3 heart emojis if you enjoyed this story. If you would like your story read on my channel, please submit your story to karma@karmagetin.com or post to u/Karmagetin on Reddit. All stories will be read anonymously with either initials, descriptions, or pseudonyms only. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Feel free to share with anyone and subscribe and hit the bell icon for any new stories to be delivered to you. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed my story. Remember, do something nice today. Help me change the world.
It's not their turn, it's my turn to shine. Like the rays of the sunlight reaching out my arms.
See you next Tuesday. Have a blessed day and a sweet night. And I will see you later.